Hi, my name's Sam Higgins and I'm a Principal Analyst with Forrester Research. It's my pleasure to be with you as part of Global Technology and Business Services Council's global series on responsible automation. For the next 10 minutes or so, I want to talk to you about the implication automations has for the workforce and in particular the future of jobs between now and 2030. But first of all, let me welcome you to the 20s. Unlike the 1920s, however, this version will be less Gatsby-like when compared to the world that emerged from the devastation of the Spanish flu before going on eventually to generate unprecedented global wealth. Instead, the 2020s may well be characterised by less prosperity-driven decadence and more uncertainty-driven hardship. Now, our current situation is arguably a poor analogy in many respects for 100 years ago, but there are similarities. Of course, as the First Great War ended, the world was plunged into a pandemic which highlighted the systemic risk of a globally connected society. But the 1920s also saw the rise of the affordable automobile, which replaced the horse and cart, mass electrification of households, radio and telephone connectivity, all of which created the foundation for a technology-fueled recovery. Henry Ford also famously raised the wages of his production line workers to attract talent from adjacent industries and reduce turnover, shifting the relationship between employees and employers. And my own countryman, George Elton Mayo, the Australian psychologist, founded the human relations movement, changing forever the view of productivity and performance around people as critical industrial capital. Fast forward then 100 years, and once again we face a decade of shocks that will change how we live and work. The COVID-19 pandemic has highlighted how the materialisation of a systemic risk reminds every firm that they are a globally connected enterprise. The industrialisation of intelligence through the widespread application of AI, robotics, all of which are driving the emergence of truly autonomous enterprises. Employee power is once again redefining workplace strategies through issues such as diversity and inclusion. And the culmination of the insights-led customer relations movement, championed by the likes of Amazon's Jeff Bezos, and giving rise to customer experience, is now spilling over into the concept of employee experience. But soothsayers abound when it comes to the impact of technological change on the labour market. Indeed, history is littered with extremes from a jobless apocalypse to a utopia of eternal creativity. Of course, very rarely is either of these extremes true, but rather reality lies somewhere in the middle. Now, at Forrester, we believe that the rise of automation and intelligent technologies such as robotics and AI, machine learning, are all going to radically reshape work across the globe. But unfortunately, hype continues to cloud the discussion. The real truth is that automation will create real change in how we get things done. So business and government leaders at all levels must plan for the transformation of human work to maximise current and future economic opportunities for all. Now, many pundits have talked in recent times about the pandemic-induced acceleration of digital transformation, but few talk about what lies beyond this post-digital world. The reality from my perspective is for firms who have completed the digitisation of many external-facing processes and interactions, I now see them turning their attention and shifting optimisation of processes and interactions around the human in the loop. Specifically, what we've observed in response to this shift in productivity focus is a corresponding shift in investment in automation. A shift we expect to continue as the capabilities of these technologies continue to improve over time. For example, in the next 12 to 24 months, 41% of firms we surveyed late last year said they plan to adopt automation and robotics. But we also know that there remain many workers who are skeptical about these new technologies. Again, our survey of global information workers found that only 40% of workers actually trust automation technology. So the challenge we face is how to accelerate automation adoption in order to remain competitive, while at the same time ensuring that we can share the benefits of an automation-fueled economic recovery within a society where jobs still matter. Not only do they matter for a source of income, but also as a source of self-esteem, social interaction, a feeling of purpose, and even a sense of community. But achieving all these outcomes really requires a thorough understanding of the impact of automation, not just on traditional industries where we might associate automation with robots, physical robots, for example, in warehouses and the like, but on the millions of workers employed in the world's services sector who, up until this point in history, have remained relatively untouched by wide-scale automation. But headlines like this don't help, especially when the majority can be traced back to a single 2013 study by Oxford academics Carl Benedict Frey and Michael Osborne, who estimated in 2013 that 47% of American jobs were susceptible or at high risk of automation. Now, it's the very nature of the Frey and Osborne study that causes much of the discussion to get derailed. Because although their research was important and foundational, it was, as I said, only ever about the susceptibility of jobs to be automated based on the potential that emerging technologies had at the time. What Frey and Osborne didn't do is model the probability of automation for a given job into the future. Nor did they attempt to assess if indeed when these emerging technologies that they had relied on would actually reach a point of sufficient maturity to support the probabilities that they'd modelled. The Frey and Osborne research also made no attempt to understand or forecast the jobs that might be transformed, labour supply moved to areas of increasing demand, triggered by the introduction of these very intelligent automation solutions, or other labour market dynamics. It's for this reason that in 2015, Forrester published its own first forecast of the impact of automation on the US labour market. But we also considered job creation, job displacement, job transformation, and also the role of the talent or gig economy. We've since updated these forecasts every couple of years, taking account of new and emerging factors, including the capability of intelligent automation, as well as its rate of adoption across different industries. Now, armed with these insights, myself and my colleagues here in the Australian team actually applied that model to the local labour force and found that without any changes in existing public or private sector policies, 4 options are emerging for our labour market between now and 2030. And this is a similar pattern that we see worldwide. Specifically, we found that over the next 10 years, 80% of jobs in Australia will be restructured in response to automation. 30% of jobs will transition to the talent or gig economy. Automation will actually create 13% more jobs than exist today, but at the same time, it will reduce the need for 29% of today's jobs. The bottom line then is that without any action, we'll see 11% or 1.5 million of today's jobs in Australia disappear over the next 10 years. But when we assess the risk of automation by persona, along with historical labour growth rates for the Australian market, we've been able to establish that without any intervention, the forces associated with automation will also create those 2 million new jobs that I mentioned before. But what you have to recognise when considering the impact of automation is that it's like a rising tide. The impact will be increasingly felt by each persona to different levels over different times across the next 10 years, particularly as these solutions get more complex, smarter, and are able to handle greater complexity and variability. Today, it's workers whose jobs largely consist of repetitive tasks and narrow contexts that a machine can easily understand who we need to think about in terms of supporting immediately. Now, these are not just roles that are subject to aspirational multi-year AI-driven transformation that many firms were focused on pre-pandemic, but rather these are jobs that can be replaced by practical recession-fighting tactics or near-term recovery strategies, using general-purpose solutions like robotic process automation, text analytics, and supervised machine learning algorithms. It's important to realise that across each of these personas, the total number of workers affected by each change differs, and as a result, so do the considerations for how and when we as employers and policymakers might need to respond. And what do I recommend that you do in response to some of the information I've shared today? Well, the first thing to realise is just like the first industrial revolution, which saw people stream from the farm to the city, the impact of intelligent automation on companies and the workforce is going to be felt for centuries to come. Now is the time for us to plan for a very different workforce that will exist in 2030. And there are 4 simple actions that you can take, regardless of where you're based in the world, to think and act on the impact of automation today. First, strategically think about those work personas that exist in your enterprise. For example, how might you leverage sensors and location-based services to free up workers to focus on maybe more human interactions that enhance customer experience? You need to rethink your talent management approach. For example, how can we allow workers to move more freely from role to role, team to team, and across organisational boundaries, rather than owning people and positions in a traditional hierarchy? One of the most critical elements, I think, is addressing the genuine fear and hesitation of people when it comes to automation. For example, organisations deploying automation to replace human labour will succeed or fail based on their ability to address sociological and organisational change fundamentals. So this really means measuring how your people and leaders feel about automation and the level to which they understand the hype versus reality of the technology. And finally, review the talent you have and understand whether you're making the best use of it. For example, while some occupations will disappear, many of those employees still have skills that can help the business. Someone who previously did a routine job maybe becomes a subject matter expert, a bot master if you like, and handles exceptions or helps train algorithms and bots to do that task in the future. So look for these bright spots and take time now to help develop those implementation skills around automation that will be really valuable. I trust today you've gained some insights into the findings and implications of Forrester's most recent Future of Jobs forecast, and that you'll gain as much from the other content that you hear shared today at the event. Thanks for your time, and look forward to speaking with you again soon.